Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, 1 minute at a time. In this, our 5th season, we are looking at Joe Johnston's 2011 film Captain America, The First Avenger. I'm Andy Nelson from the True Story FM Entertainment Podcast Network. Doing it solo again. Back talking about minute 84, which begins with Cap, Bucky, and Gabe moving across the top of the Hydra train and ends with the Hydra Trooper taking aim at Cap. Back on the show, it is Will Freeland. Hello, Will.
Hi, thank you for having me. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday. We haven't said that in far too long since our season with Thor, but, it's still Thursday. It's always Thursday.
Always.
So, gotta love that. We are back on the train, and we're starting on the exterior of it. When they swung down, I know it's hard to tell. As I said, in the last minute when the train is on the bridge, if you count, it looks like the train has about 7 cars. As they come swinging down, it looks like Steve lands on... it looks like he ends up kind of landing on the 3rd car. That's about where it looks like he lands.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like Bucky and Gabe both land on the 4th car. So they're like one train car behind him. And then they start moving, and it looks like they move up from a couple shots. It looks like they move up over the 2nd car, up to the 1st car, but the 1st car is the engine, and that looks different. And this car looks like all the other cars behind the engine. So suddenly it seems like there's another car in front of them. So it's a little confusing the way that this is set up. And then they climb down the ladder to go into it. And so... and they're going to go through this car and the one in front of it. So there's even another car before you get to the engine. So this train keeps growing in front of them. It's like a Hydra train. It's a Hydra train. It keeps just once you hop on one car, two more
take
in front
its
of you.
place.
Again, if you're noticing this stuff while you're watching the movie, it's probably not working for you. This is the sort of thing that generally you're not paying attention to in the context of a film. But when you're watching it minute by minute, you definitely notice these things, and it starts going, it seems like where are all these train cars coming from?
Well, it makes me also think, if I were landing on a Hydra train, or any train really, what car would I go to jump down? I feel like you always want to go to the engine, right?
Yeah, I mean, that seems like it would make sense. And I guess the only reason that I would think that they don't, I don't know. We're going to talk a lot about trains over the next couple minutes and people moving across the top of them, because I definitely have some questions for you there. But in the scope of when you think of movies with trains, oftentimes the engine has a little bit of a different design. So maybe it's you can't access it the same way you can access the other train cars. I feel like that's something you see sometimes in trains where you've got to get in a car behind or a couple cars behind, because the engine and maybe the one behind it are designed differently. And so you have to kind of do something different. And in this case, they climb down a ladder and open a door to get in. I don't know, at least they're in at least the 3rd car is the way that it's kind of set up. Yeah, it never shows us. And I guess this is a struggle with the film. Why do they just decide to pick this one? It would have made more sense if we see them go up to the engine, or even have had a line up at the front, or when they're on the cliff above where Fallsworth says, I don't see a ladder into that 1st car. You're going to need to you get in a couple cars behind. Something to give us a sense as to why they choose here.
Right. Because to your point, he seems to be getting on a random car. And so if you landed on one car, why travel up 2 cars and then decide to jump in?
Well, that's assuming that they know that Zola's in the front of the train. That's the other thing is who knows how Hydra uses their trains? These could all be filled with troops. They could be all filled with equipment. There may be a lounge car toward the end of the train, and Zola's hanging out in his lounge car.
Well, yeah, you got to have a food car.
Yeah, where's the food car? Right. All of this stuff, when we see this train moving, there's not a lot of, I don't know. We haven't seen any history with Hydra trains in the scope of this film. So it's like, how do they so specifically know we've got to maneuver toward the front of the train to get, I mean, maybe it is just to stop it. Maybe that's the goal, but again, it's not well defined. And then I like, what is the strategy here? Because Steve climbs down the ladder, Bucky's kind of on lookout, and then Gabe is just kneeling down on the top of the train with his gun pointed, like, is just in case Hydra troops come out. And then what does he do once they go inside?
Because with Gabe, I feel like that's exactly what you would do if you're playing like a Call of Duty video game. Like you have one person on lookout in case there's a spawn on the next car over and they're going to start popping out on the roof. So you have one person either kneel or go prone and just keep an eye on the roof. But that's the only explanation I can think of, which has nothing to do with Captain America.
Yeah, it makes no sense. I mean, obviously we'll see what Gabe is up to, but even like in next week's minute, when we finally see kind of like after all the tragedy has happened on the train and stuff, like it looks like he's still just kneeling on the top. Like I don't fully understand exactly what Gabe is doing and everything. It's a strange.
We didn't get briefed on this mission, and I feel like it's not fair.
It's strange.
Why are they only bringing 3 people? Why is Gabe hanging out on the roof?
Yeah,
doesn't make sense.
It's strange. And yeah, because again, and maybe this is why they limited it to just these 3, not the full team coming down. Because then it's like, well, now we've got all of these extra people. Are they all standing on the roof? Like, what are they doing? Like, I feel like they don't really know at this point what to do with Gabe. Yeah.
Also, to the detriment of the character that Dave is, when I see a splintering off like this from the main group, and you have your quote unquote main characters of Cap and Bucky teamed up with one other person, it makes me think that they're a spy. And they're going to set them up.
Or that they're going to die.
Right.
Yeah.
Black dude dies first. So like, either they're going to die, or because my heart is starting to race because I'm like, I wonder if this is the scene where Bucky is going to get lost. And so then I'm like, oh gosh, is this going to be Gabe's fault? Is he going to set him up? Is he going to be a Hydra traitor? And like my mind just spirals in every like non-gun shooting scene. I'm just like, but what about Gabe? What about Gabe? What's he doing? What's he doing? It's terrible. I've watched way too many action movies.
Well, but yeah, and you know, I guess I don't know if that's a strength for the film to not play into tropes that we're used to,
right?
Or that it's just it sets us up in a way where we're thinking about it too much, because it's like, you brought him here. Why is he not here? Like, what are you doing with this guy who's on the top of the train? Like, it just ends up feeling like I want them to use him in some capacity, and I get it. Like inside the train, which we're about to talk about, like there is a very specific setup that is happening in here that they're working toward. But I don't know. I guess what happens is, as I think about it, it starts feeling very scripted. It feels like, well, we've got to get Steve and Bucky isolated so that they can be separated so that something can happen, because this is where we're taking that character in this franchise. And so I don't know. I feel like they've scripted it in a way where it does start feeling like when you really look at it, it feels scripted. It doesn't feel as clean as it could have been.
Yeah. That's with our fancy future knowledge.
Exactly. But as it stands, so Steve and Bucky go into this train car. So they're in at least the 3rd car back. And what we see is they come into what looks like a storage train. It seems like they're kind of looking around like we were expecting some sort of trouble, but all they find is a bunch of storage. There's all these crates and shelves. We'll see what's on the crates in a later minute, in tomorrow's minute. It's hard to read here. And so they maneuver through it, and then the next car, the doors open, and they I don't know. At this point, does it feel like this is a setup or a trap to you? You kind of already alluded to it. And 2, do you think they feel like they're walking into a trap?
They're probably starting to think that. So, because when we get in, Yeah, so the car behind him, the door is closed, but the car in front of him, the door is open. And there's nobody on either of those cars that we can see. That screams, I mean, like, this is Hydra. Hydra's known for its head count. How do you have a Hydra train with a VIP and no troops? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're probably thinking this doesn't bode well. I don't know how many horror movies they've watched by like 1943, but I feel like they still have that tension of just like, oh, okay, this doesn't bode well.
Well, yeah, there is an element to it that feels it feels like a setup. You know, you're walking into this space that I mean, the way that Gabe reacted on the top of the train, like he got his gun ready. He's waiting for troops to come flooding out as the war kind of starts erupting onto this train here. And it doesn't. And so, yeah, it does set up this sense of like something suspicious is happening. I don't know what. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think it works. I think it does work.
Yeah.
But what ends up happening is something that feels very tropey to me. I wonder how you feel, but it's I don't know. I call it the lock them in separate rooms trick.
Yeah.
Steve goes through the door and like the two doors between the train cars shut on the two of them, separating them. Yeah. I mean, does that, I guess at this point, it feels very much like a trap. Does it work for you?
I guess I don't know what the goal is because like the people, the Hydra agents are already like placed. So like you have this big bulky dual wielding Tesla cannon guy in the front, and then you have like 2 or 3 Hydra agents just like grunts in the back. How do you know you're going to get Cap up front? Because if the roles got switched, Bucky's dead immediately on site.
Well, and like, yeah, and why not just have this guy with the Tesseract cannon there? I mean, he can probably take Bucky out pretty quick. Like, why does it have to be? Why do they have to separate them so that he is the only person up against Cap? I mean, obviously we know, you know, Zola's been given the order to take care of the guy with the shield, and here he is trying to take care of the guy with the shield. But it seems like if Bucky was in the room and this guy happened to hit Bucky too, that, well, one less thing to have to worry about now.
Yeah, it's not a problem at all.
It's a funny little thing, and it seems like a strange plan for Zola to like, let's lock them into separate rooms and you go take out the one guy and this guy will take out Captain America.
The only catalyst I can see for separating them is if we had a Zola or Faustus or someone who's known for hypnotizing that has talked about a plan to, what if we recruited all of the Howling Commandos and brainwashed them and made them like Hydra generals. And if there was talk of that, then, oh yeah, separate Bucky, separate the rest of the commandos, and don't kill them, just incapacitate them, and, you know, we'll put them through whatever hypnosis we need to put them through. But Cap needs to go.
Yeah.
But that's not a conversation that's happened. So, like, it doesn't make sense to split them up unless there was some sort of Soviet plan that we knew about.
It's a strange plan that Hydra seems to have thrown into place here. And, you know, in the scope of all of everything that's happening here, I mean, we haven't really talked about the fact that they know, like Zola knows what's happening. Like they were ready for this. And so that speaks to the fact that everything that they were eavesdropping on was all a setup, right? Like they had basically set this entire train trip up, leaked the details so that Captain America and the Howling Commandos, and just as a side note, in the script, it does call him Captain America and the Invaders. They actually have called the group the Invaders in the script, which I think is kind of cool. But yeah, But yeah, I mean, basically, they are very specifically leaking this so that they can capture them. Now, why Zola would go on the train, if that's the case, is like, I don't understand that. Like, we're setting this up so we can kill Captain America, but I'm still going to be there just in case.
Yeah, it's like we can come up with all kinds of scenarios that would make this make sense, but then there's one other piece that makes it fall apart.
Yeah, right.
It's too bad. So the design of this Hydra tank man, I don't entirely understand it. Like he does his first shot and he misses because he's a bad guy and he's a grunt. But then he doesn't fire again until Zola's like, fire again. And you're like, oh, cool. Now I know. I don't know. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Also, since you can't see his face, it just makes me feel like that could have just been a robot. It didn't have to be a person.
A lot of these Hydra troopers, they're designed like sometimes their faces are more covered up, sometimes they're less covered up. This is one of those, in the Captain America, the Art of Captain America book, they talk about the soldiers and how like these Hydra troops, how they had 5 classifications. This would definitely fall under the Hydra troop with heavy artillery. And in this particular case, I mean, he has these cannons on his arm. In a way, he very much looks like the flamethrower Hydra trooper that we'll see later in the film. And in fact, at first I was like, are these the flamethrowers? I think they're designed a little different, but these are definitely the Tesseract cannons that he's blasting at Steve with. They don't seem to, I don't know. I struggle with the power of these. And, we've talked a lot about Tesseract blasts and stuff, because when the Tesseract cannons shoot the Tesseract blasts, or even when the Tesseract guns shoot blasts, when they hit people, they disintegrate them. But when they hit factory walls or other things that are inert, they blow up like a regular explosion. And so here, like when he's blasting and stuff, you never see any actual explosions when he's hitting like the walls of the room and stuff. It actually looks like, blue explosions. And so,
right.
I feel like I'm a little conflicted on the way that this, I mean, I like the design. It does look interesting.
Yeah. It's all about Tesseract concentration.
Well, I guess that's what it is. We talked about like maybe there's a switch on the side, disintegrate or just blow up, or
there's a dial.
Yeah, exactly. But the other thing about him is like it's such a heavy looking outfit that I also wonder how like is he missing because this thing is so heavy that it's really hard to actually aim and maneuver? Like it seems so bulky,
Sure, but also like it's a train car. There's not a whole lot of left and right you got to worry about, which makes this the perfect scene or like situation for something with low mobility.
Yeah.
It should have been perfect.
It should have been perfect. Yes. And this also going back to Zola and his decision to actually be on this train, this would have been another perfect instance for them to have had a moment where he's not on. I know they had to set up the story, but what if he wasn't on the train, but you're seeing, like the troops are seeing him through a video image of his face, like just being projected in the train. Like that would have been a cool way to kind of use that Zola character in a way that had a nice comic book reference to it.
Yeah, that would have been real cool. Oh man. I'm paused on the minute that I'm paused on the back of the like heavy trooper. And black and Tesseract blue just really work together. I really like this color combination.
It's really nice, right? It looks great. It's like this crazy large battery pack that he obviously has to carry around to have these cannons on his arms. But yeah, it looks so cool. The way it kind of has those, it's almost like scales, or like, it's almost like treads on a tank kind of running down his arm. It's very cool looking. I like the design.
Yeah, it's kind of like, are those the bullet cases? Are those just extra battery packs? What are they? I don't know, but they look really cool.
Yeah. Well, and if it's so big and if it needs so much energy for it, I feel like the blast should be even bigger. And then when it hits, like, why is it just like putting a little, kind of a singe on the door frame instead of like a big explosion? Like, I mean, we're going to find out tomorrow when Steve uses it, it does more damage than this guy ever does. It's like, I guess Steve got the dials right when he turned it.
Exactly. When it's so weird because, gosh, it really throws it off because this minute is pretty dark and it's pretty monotone. And then you have your Tesseract weapon, which is all super bright blue. And then you cut to Zola and his screens are all this like really obnoxious yellow sepia filter. It's jarring. I don't like the look of it. I don't know. It just really throws me off when I see it.
That's so funny. What I think of, which of course happened after this film, but I always think to Snowpiercer and the engine room in that train. And I just think it's funny that here's Chris Evans in yet another futuristic train with a crazy engine room with kind of a circular thing at the head of it, which I don't know. I find very funny. I don't know if you ever saw Snowpiercer, but it's a great film.
I didn't get to. I wanted to.
Check it out. It's a really fun film. Really interesting. Well made. All right, so Captain America, he's fighting this trooper with the cannons, and he's doing a good job dodging the shots and everything. Meanwhile, Bucky is in the original train car. We'll call it train car number 3, and he is just basically moving back and forth, hiding behind boxes and crates, and shooting at these Hydra troopers that come in. We see him take out one, and then another one comes in, so he's still fighting 2. And that's kind of where he is as we kind of come to the end of the minute here. He's pinned down. He's got these 2 troopers shooting at him, and then meanwhile Captain America is still taking on blasts from the big guy.
When Bucky's crouching behind some of those ammo boxes, and there's the like tension building gun sparks behind him, I don't understand the angle of that shot for those bullets, like how the Hydra agent hit that, because it seems like like the explosion happens behind, like at a level that is fully behind Bucky's cover.
Yeah, right.
So like, is the Hydra goon super far up, took a shot, and then ran back?
What's funny about that shot, well, and this just speaks to the kind of the pyro team, and as far as like what they're rigging, as far as the explosives to kind of go off when they're blowing things up, right? And they are very sparky as far as like when the bullets are hitting things, because even when Bucky shoots down toward them, like it is some serious spark that we're getting from kind of the way that it is hitting. I don't think a bullet would necessarily do that,
I don't think
unless
so either.
this train is, unless a train is made with some sort of crazy material,
like graphite or something,
or some sort of paint on the interior that is flammable, and when it hits, it kind of like ignites little, the fragments that it blows off, but it doesn't make a ton of sense. Yeah, and then that moment when it's behind him, it almost looks like it's coming down the wall, as if someone on the outside of the train is using like a welding torch to cut into it or something. Like that's the way it looks.
Yeah.
It's a weird moment there.
Yeah, the size of the explosion always made me feel like it was a shotgun blast.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Because it covers such a large area behind Bucky. But no one's using shotguns here, which is the perfect time to use a shotgun.
Right.
But, whatever. It's fine.
Oh, yeah. We're building to something. We've separated our 2 heroes on this train. Let's wrap it up for today.
For those in the know, tension is building.
Tension is building. That's right. And then, we've got these 2, and then, we haven't even talked about the fact that Gabe is also separated, still sitting on the top of the train, smoking a cigarette, something. I don't know what Gabe is doing.
Right. Like, if they had just said, keep an eye out, just to make sure, they don't get flanked from the roof, because they full on got flanked from the car that Gabe is sitting on top of right now. But whatever, it's fine.
Or, yeah, I know. Or even just like, we'll come in through the train cars. You go across the top, just something so that we go, okay, well, he's moving across the top of the train to get to the engine, which he is. We just don't know that until later minutes. But it's just
this is the future. But I feel like I don't think we see him running across to the engine. It's just all of a sudden he's at the engine.
There is a shot exterior. It's from a very far distance. You see a figure on the top, but honestly, it looks like he's still kneeling. And this is when it's about to go into the tunnel. I think the idea is he's walking across, but then he breaks through the glass and pops into the engine room. But it's I don't know. It's not as effective as it could be. They could have made that work a little better. Oh well. But we're not there. I'll talk about that next week with our next guest. But for you, we'll be back tomorrow to talk about minute 85. So thank you so much for joining me again today.
Of course. Remind everyone again where they can track you down on the internet. I have my own podcast as well called Hype Is My Superpower. It's me and my best friend talking every single week about the things that make us hype. Almost always going to be Marvel Comics. It's a lot of fun, and I highly recommend you come and check it out.
Awesome. Well, definitely check that out, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about minute 85. So until next time, True Believers.
Okay, bye.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Spread the News by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.